right, so let's look at play and stimulation, because we really do need to stimulate our babies optimally, and this is the key to stimulating them. So the first thing is that how do they each react? Our settled baby needs a lot of stimulation. So remember, these babies have got, really, they don't take in everything, and they tend to have laid back milestones. And by that I mean that instead of sitting at like 5.5 months, they might only sit at 7 months. Or instead of crawling at kind of 7 or 8 months, they don't crawl until 10 or 11 months. Often they have slightly late social signals as well, like smiling, because remember, they're not really wired to really want that super high level of social interaction. So they tend to have very laid back milestones, and sitting in particular is their favorite milestone. They love to sit and watch the world go by. So your social butterfly, these little ones need a lot of sensory input and a sensory stimulation. They seek it all the time. So they want interaction. And this is, if you've got a social butterfly and you put them down to just kind of go and do something else, they'll immediately start whining and moaning because they want social interaction or stimulation, or in order to feel that they're in that optimal zone of arousal. They love stimulation. Your slow to warm up, they love to have routines, as I said, and they do love to engage with people and they love to socialize, but they only do it well when they are rested and in a set routine. So your slow to warm up will enjoy play dates, they will enjoy the social interaction, but they'll do it best when they are rested and when they're in their routine. And then your sensitive little one, with them, the secret, less is more. When too much is going on in their environment, they do become very overstimulated. So when there's too many toys in front of them, too many people, too much noise, too much social interaction, too much of a mum and baby group, they tend to have their meltdowns. So let's see what we can do for each of these little different babies. So let's start off with the settled baby. So your settled baby, as I said, is often slightly slower on the slower side developmentally, and you mustn't worry about that at all, because they all catch up at the end. And I'm not one to really get fastidious and focus too much on milestones, but these little ones tend to have a little bit of laid back milestones. They don't learn to clap necessarily as early as others, because they don't need to get your attention as much as others, because they're much more laid back. They're very relaxed. They love to sit and watch the world go by. So what's important with these little ones? Well, one of the most important things is that they must be stimulated, because we sometimes the tendency is to not stimulate them because they're just so easy. We don't feel that we need to. And I once in my practice had a little baby who came in who was developmentally delayed. She wasn't just a settled baby. She was much more extreme than that. And all we needed to do was give her a little bit of extra stimulation, because she just wasn't seeking enough. So lots of stimulation, lots of tummy time, lots of loves and cuddles, lots of opportunities for stimulation, interaction, and socialization. Those are very, very important when we're looking at a settled baby. For these little ones, I actually recommend scheduling at least 2 stimulation activities per week from 6 months onwards. So that can be a swimming lesson or mum and baby group or music group. Really, they do very well when they are exposed to nice stimulation groups. They often need slightly more intensity and sensory experiences, so foster movement to get them to perk up a little bit. Slightly louder noises, because they're habituating a lot of the sensory information. So sensory playtime for them, particularly as toddlers, is important. And then as toddlers, you can actually use their imagination to spark their engagement. So imagination is the gateway. It's absolutely wonderful. We do a lot of it in Play Sense. But from about 18 months onwards, you can put a hat on your head and say, I am the cowboy, or whatever it is. I am the princess. And use their imagination to help them to engage socially. Remember that these little ones can move into being a social butterfly when they are optimally stimulated. So the more you stimulate them, you might find the more they seek it, which is really, really wonderful. And they love lots of movement play and lots of angular movement games. Lots of music too. So stimulate your settled baby. It'll be fabulous for their brain processing. Well, what about your social butterfly? Well, your social butterfly wants lots of stimulation all the time. Lots of stimulation, lots of socialization. And they can become quite irritable and whiny when they're not stimulated. So what's the secret with them? Well, definitely more is more. More music, more social interaction, more outings, more walks in the garden, more pointing out things, more stories to read. So more is more. But you do need to watch them, because they can be like that Duracell bunny who goes, and then they suddenly drop. And that's because they become overstimulated. So you must schedule some downtime with these little ones. And for them, the best type of downtime that I like to recommend is actually a walk in nature. Because what nature does is it actually gives your brain a chance to kind of switch off and chill out. But for the social butterfly's brain, it still feels like they're getting a little bit of stimulation. So these little ones, you need to have scheduled social engagements. So you don't have to do a play date every day, but they will love play dates. And the more social interaction they have, the more social they become. And then for stimulation classes, you can enroll them in swimming lessons, movement stimulation, and music-rich classes. Those are the type of things that really float their boat. But of course, with these little ones, you're always going to be wanting to watch their signs for overstimulation. And so the signs for overstimulation is tugging at the ear, rubbing the eyes, turning away, getting hiccups, posseting if they're little babies. And all of these signs of overstimulation can indicate to you that they've just had too much. And so particularly for your little social butterfly, your 4 to 5 month old, please watch carefully for those signs of overstimulation. When they're toddlers, you're going to need to toddler-proof the space. For those of you who've got toddlers, you'll probably know the scenario that social butterflies tend to be climbers. So they climb the burglar bars, they climb anything they can get on top of. They climb on top of the coffee table and stand there because they are adrenaline junkies. They want to be higher, faster, and kind of throw themselves off things. So you really need to toddler-proof the space when you're dealing with a social butterfly. One of the things that actually works quite well to calm them down a bit while it gives them stimulation are sucking games and vibration games. So if any of you have seen those wiggly pens or even a vibrating toothbrush, actually giving them that to get their sensory stimulation is a good idea because that's a wonderful regulating form of sensory stimulation. And then you can encourage lots and lots of stimulation activities and socialization. So these little ones tend to do very well when they are in a play date with another social butterfly. They kind of spark each other and have lots of fun together. So what about your slow to warm up baby? Well, your slow to warm up baby is more cheerful when the routine is consistent, which we've mentioned. And so you need to really time their play and stimulation according to certain times. So make sure that they're well rested and then have socialization. So I love play dates for these little ones straight after nap. So if you finish your nap at 2 o'clock, have a friend come over just after that. Remember that novelty isn't their best. So when they move into a new situation, like for instance a mom and baby group and they've got to meet new toddlers or they go to a birthday party, they will generally stick to you. And I often call them Velcro babies. So they kind of like stick like little limpets to you. And 5 minutes before the end of the birthday party, they warm up and then they go and engage with all the other children and then they don't want to leave. And that's because they've taken their time to warm up and now you've brought another change of them having to leave. They can also, as toddlers, tend to be quite bossy because they like to say exactly how it's going to be done. And they tend to be quite specific about the way that it's got to be done. And you'll see this. I mean, for some of you, you might kind of feel like the whole household revolves around your baby, but around their routines, around what they want. It's often with our slow to warm up babies because they just, if you do it any other way, it's not worth the pain. So you end up just doing it the same way that works best for them all the time. For these little ones, a routine works really well and they like to get into knowing what's coming next. So for instance, if you join a play group as an example, or any play group, you're going to find that you want to have a really set morning routine so that they know exactly what's coming. I wake up and I get dressed and I have breakfast and then I have some tea and then I get in the car and then I go to play school. Because if you disrupt that exact routine, by the time they get to school, they're going to be really crotchety. So you really do need to make sure that they are that their routine stays fairly consistent. Now these little ones, because socialization is so important and these little ones don't jump into social situations, it's worth picking their friends carefully. And by that, you want to have play dates, but you want to have them in small numbers. A play date of 3 toddlers with your 13-month-old is going to overwhelm them. Okay, so try and keep your play dates 1-on-1 or 1-on-2. And try and find little friends who are a little bit more predictable. So these slow to warm up babies do very well with settled babies because the settled baby is quite happy to sit on their bum and interact from there. And the slow to warm up likes the predictability of that. The slow to warm up doesn't love being with a social butterfly because a social butterfly is all over the place. They're noisy, they're loud, they're bouncy, they fall into them. And so the slow to warm is kind of very reticent. It's a bit like Eeyore and Tigger. So Tigger bouncing all over the place and Eeyore going, wait. I'm just trying to work out my space here. And so watch the type of friendships and the number of children that your little one is exposed to. Please do not disrupt day sleeps for parties. So if your friend has scheduled a party on Saturday at 12 o'clock and your slow to warm up sleeps from 12 to 2, don't disrupt that sleep because with these little ones, it just isn't worth it. You'll arrive at the party, they will be man down, they will be moaning, they'll never leave your side, and then they'll fall asleep on your lap just before you leave because they don't like having their sleeps disrupted. In terms of stimulation classes, these babies do really well if you can find a baby signing class. And baby signing classes are wonderful because baby sign language is what they can learn just before they learn to speak. So it's not exactly the same as hard of hearing sign language, but we use it for little babies and it allows them to start to express themselves. And communication for these little ones is very important. So you'll often find a slow to warm up baby is actually quite a tricky toddler until they've got their words. And the minute they've got their words, they become social and engaged because they can actually command the space and they can actually control the space much better once they've got words. So words are very, very important. And you'll see the second last bullet down here is that they use tools of the mind and language. So that as soon as they can articulate how they're feeling, they become much, much easier toddlers. With these little ones, less is more, so don't overstimulate them because they will, remember that their threshold is low and they will flip into being overstimulated. They do need exposure to sensory activities and sometimes they avoid it. So these little ones often don't like putting their hands in shaving cream, or they don't like playing in the, in the more sensory spaces, but they need to be challenged. They need to have their senses stimulated. So you want to have a little bit of stimulation, but within a predictable routine. And then a really good idea for them. And here is the tidbit for you guys, for your slow to warm up baby. Very important. You must have a calm down tent. And a calm down tent can also be known as a timeout space, but not in the way of it being part of discipline. A calm down tent is a little tent that you put up in the corner of your lounge, or in the corner of the TV room, or in the corner of the kitchen, or in their bedroom, that has just the stuff they love. So their little doo-doo blankie maybe, and some dummies if that would help them to calm, and maybe a book and some music and some lavender drops. And that's a space they can go when they're starting to feel overstimulated, because remember, these little ones can get overstimulated. So your sensitive baby, it is a case of less is more in order to prevent overstimulation. And these little ones become so easily overstimulated. Any social interaction, anything that's unpredictable can push them over the edge. So for these little ones, stick to your routines, watch your wake times carefully, because your wake times will let you know how long they can actually be stimulated for. So for those of you who've got little ones under 6 weeks of age, for your newborns, their awake time is only 45 minutes to an hour. Now in that, you've got to feed, you've got to change a nappy, which only leaves about 3 minutes for stimulation. And you might be thinking, how do I fit all this stimulation in? It's such a short period of time. But the reality is that short window of awake time allows just for the right amount of stimulation, particularly for these sensitive babies. So don't worry about stimulating them too much. Just being alive at 6 weeks old is a lot of stimulation. So don't worry about pushing stimulation too much. Remember that less is more with these ones. So don't put a whole lot of toys around them. So when they're 6 months old and they're sitting and there's toys around them, when there's too much going on, they'll become overstimulated. Less is more. Always schedule play dates and that type of thing for after sleeps. Sleep is very important, and use lots of quiet activities. Things like reading. They love reading. They love doing things like reading and Lego as toddlers. And then for stimulation classes, it's small groups, less noisy activities, and things like massage classes are the things that really work well. And, don't be scared with your stimulation classes of being picky and moving from one to the next. I certainly did that with my little ones, that if I could see that, for instance, my slow to warm up, like I took her to a music class, she hated it because it was way too noisy. It was all too over the place because she was more sensitive. But when I took her to something that was quieter interactions with a lovely specific routine, she absolutely loved it. Remember with these ones, have a calm down tent and a space with things like lava lamps and smells. That really works well for them.